Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this October 5, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Yesterday, hundreds of hot air balloons took to the skies above New Mexico at the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. It's the largest festival of its kind anywhere in the world, and tens of thousands of visitors have flocked to the city for a closer look. Pilot Jim Lynch said a small population and weak winds make the region the ideal place for a hot air balloon flight.
The reason Albuquerque is very special is because the Sandia Mountains generally produce what they call box winds. And as the sun comes up, a lot of times the wind changes to the prevailing winds to the north. So in the morning early, you go south and then you climb up some, you pick up the winds and go north, and then you can just box around.
It's something, until you see it, you can't imagine it. I've seen pictures of it, but until you're here, you can't imagine it.
Okay, so there's the story on something kind of light and interesting. I thought that would be a good opening story following the Day of Atonement. For those of you who are observing the Feast of Tabernacles coming up in just 5 days from yesterday, or in other words, coming up this Thursday, starting this Wednesday night, the Feast of Tabernacles. Well, there's something, they call it a fiesta, and fiesta is just another language word for festival. And feast is a festival, a festival of tabernacles, Feast of Tabernacles, beginning this Wednesday evening. And Thursday night, friends, I promised you I had a story on the Pope, and I'd show you a slide. I'm going to show you that slide after I show you the video on the story of about the Pope that related to today, and I've got video on it already because the event that I was going to tell you about Thursday night that would be happening today has now happened earlier today. Pope Francis has opened a gathering of more than 200 senior Roman Catholic bishops by urging them not to impose what he called intolerable moral burdens on believers. The gathering, known as a synod, is discussing the Church's position on controversial issues. They will be joined by lay Catholics to debate abortion, contraception, homosexuality, and divorce. You'll hear that in this video report from Rome with Caroline Wyatt.
Sunday Mass amid the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica at the heart of the Vatican. Its very pillars a reminder that the Church and its teachings have endured over centuries. Yet Pope Francis has raised hopes of change amongst some Catholics as the celibate clergymen here gather to discuss how Catholic families should live. Today, the Pope used a biblical parable to remind them that greed and pride by the Church's leaders could thwart God's will. He told those gathered here that God's dream always clashes with the hypocrisy of some of his servants, and that they must let themselves be guided by the Holy Spirit. Ahead of the synod, gay and lesbian Catholics have also been meeting in Rome. The Pope's earlier comments on homosexuality, saying, "Who am I to judge?" have offered hope of a fresh approach.
This is the first time that any synod has addressed the issue of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered people in the Church and their children. And it's recognising that LGBT people have children, and what are the pastoral issues for those same-sex couples and their children.
The synod's agenda was drawn up after a survey of Catholic opinion around the world. ordered by the Pope last year to find out why Rome's teachings are ignored by so many of the faithful. Catholic clergy and some families will spend the coming weeks discussing and debating family life and how the Church's teachings affect that in the 21st century, although anyone hoping for radical change is likely to be disappointed. Caroline Wyatt, BBC News, Rome.
Now, friends, Caroline Wyatt filed that report today from Rome. She also did a report earlier on Friday, and it's a little different. I want to play it for you. You notice we have the white horse up. I'll pause for a moment, put our slide on the screen, bring it forward to show you the chart that we use from Revelation 6 that explains the seals of Revelation, which the first four of those seals are depicted by God in the book of Revelation through the Apostle John, who wrote from the Isle of Patmos. And God depicts those first four seals as four horses of different colors with horsemen. That first horse is depicted in Revelation as that first seal, I should say, is depicted as a white horse in Revelation, which Jesus Christ described in plain language through the gospel writers Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, as religious deception. He said, "Beware, many will come in my name, saying that I am Christ, and yet they will deceive many. And don't you, my disciples and my followers, don't you be deceived." The second seal, depicted by a red horse, Christ explained in plain language to be war and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. The third seal, depicted by a black horse in Revelation, Christ explained would be a scarcity of food, famine. And the fourth seal, depicted by a pale horse whose rider is named Death, and alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave. Jesus Christ explained its activities as in three terms: loimus, meaning disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt, and seismus, seismic activity, commotions in the air of all kinds. Gale force winds is an example. Commotions on the ground, earthquakes is an example. Of course, so that also includes other commotions on the ground of a seismic nature: volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, wildfires, flooding, any seismic earth-type condition. But the first one we're focusing on for the moment is, I just want to explain them all because we'll have stories related to several of these horses tonight. But that first seal, the white horse, you see it, I've got it depicted on our screen for these first couple of stories. Now, I didn't dare put that white horse up in front of the first story, which was a festive one that I related to the upcoming Feast of Tabernacles, and though that is a church religious function, that function is with the Church of God, and that church, my friends, is not a church that espouses things that Christ warned you have to beware of, and deception. Except where you have false ministers that are in sheep's clothing, and their true colors really come out. They come out as a white horse, and not the one of Revelation 19 that Christ will ride when he returns, but the one he spoke of as an antichrist before he returns that would be part of these seals, and part of, in the case of those who from within, they become recognized apostasy. It becomes easy to discern when they start encouraging Baal worship in a church that understood and followed Jesus Christ in, as he did, observing the Sabbath, both the weekly and the annual Sabbath. Most of you that tune in and view regularly, you know that. So let's not waste any more time getting to this next story, and then I'll show you the slide that I told you I did up. A little special slide I did with the Pope. Had a little fun putting it together. I'll show you that after this story from Friday with BBC's, let's see, what's her exact title here? Let me get her exact title. BBC's Religious Affairs correspondent, Caroline Wyatt, reporting from Rome. The first report was from today. This report is from Friday.
Cardinal Vincent Nichols came to Rome and took up his symbolic parish church here, a tradition for all new cardinals. Many in his own flock in England and Wales have high hopes for this special synod. For the first time in over 3 decades, Catholic clergy and some families will gather to discuss the Church's teachings on how Catholics should live.
I think this synod has to follow the path indicated by Pope Francis, which on the one hand is being extremely sensitive to the realities in which people live their lives, sometimes with great courage and difficulty, and on the other hand being faithful to the radical nature of following Christ.
Over the past year and a half, Pope Francis has created a sense of optimism among the faithful that he might bring the Church's teachings closer to the real lives of today's Catholics. This gathering is the first real test of Pope Francis's vision for the future of the Church and his ability to reform it. The questionnaire sent to Catholics ahead of the Synod showed that many wanted change in the Church's teachings on issues ranging from contraception to divorce or same-sex relationships. So now the battle lines are being drawn up between the liberal and the conservative wings of the Church. On the liberal side is Peter Stanford, a former editor of the Catholic Herald.
There is certainly at the moment a spirit of optimism and a spirit of positivity in the pews that hasn't been there for a long time. And I think if this synod is just a damp squib and they tell us that these male celibate old men know better than we do what the reality of marriage and parenthood is, I think we'll just think, oh no.
Others, though, say the Church doesn't need to change its teaching. The Pharaohs are expecting their 4th child and say the family remains the bedrock, however hard it can sometimes be.
I'm really hoping that some really strong and clear messages are going to come out about marriage, about family, because we know that families are the building blocks of society. We know that families are where you raise your young, they're where you look after the elderly, and when families crumble, it's not in a common good. Society crumbles.
The results of the Synod won't be clear for some time, nor whether this really is a reforming Pope, ready to shake off centuries of tradition. Caroline Wyatt, BBC News, Rome.
And friends, this Synod is seen as the litmus test for Pope Francis, which may well be judged on the outcome, my head notes here say. Now, I told you I had some slides that I put together, or I actually incorporated one of these into the other, but this is the slide I put together that especially relates to what the Pope will be doing in November, next month, on November 29, when he travels to Strasbourg, where he is going to be speaking before the European Parliament. He accepted an invitation for that, and the Vatican has released word already that he will. Actually, I don't need that title thing at the top. Well, all right. So there's that slide, and then I incorporated that slide into one that I put together for my cover photo on Facebook, and I'm give you a little sneak look at that. This is what I plan on putting on my Facebook page, using that slide that I just showed you. I'll go back to that for a moment, with the Pope Francis riding a white horse. Now, he may or may not be the final Pope, but his going and even his appearance or speaking before the European Parliament in Strasbourg in November, toward the end of November, November 29, and I'm certainly watching for that and news from that to hear what he's going to be saying there, what he may be inspired by the God of this world to say there. It still may be that he won't be the last and final Pope. He could just simply be the setup man for the final Pope. We don't know yet, He could be setting it all up for himself. But with the way news is going and the way the fourth seal is extremely active in the news for the past many months with no let-up, and the way the red horse of war is accelerating activity. Friends, I greatly anticipate that God will be allowing, and the God of this world, it's talking about the God up above, will be allowing the God of this world who sits on this earth to go ahead and put things together in a way that will help bring together. You see, I've got 10 stars. I took 10 of the 12 stars from the EU flag, and I put 5 on each side of the Pope, colored the ones on the, as you look at it, what would represent the east side of the Pope, yellow and kind of an Asian color, and the 5 stars on the left side of the Pope, or the west side of the Pope, I colored red to represent the European, the 5 countries or regions from the west and the 5 from the east that will give their power to a beast. Now, the Pope himself is not the beast, but he rides the beast. And just like any person who rides a horse has the reins of the horse, they guide and steer where that powerful beast goes. And more than steers where it goes, he has a lot of influence over that beast and will tell it who's anathema and tell it who to string up, or burn at the stake, or cut their heads off with a guillotine, however they do it, during the great martyrdom that is a part of the upcoming next major event to happen in prophecy, that being the 5th seal. Now, the first 4 seals have been very active for a long time, and they are galloping at a faster and faster trot now. They are accelerating the activities of these first 4 seals that have even been operating since Jesus Christ's time. But the 5th seal, we've had a type of it. Fox's Book of Martyrs talks about a time of martyrdom, but that time of martyrdom will be nothing in comparison to what's coming. The great martyrdom during the mega trouble, the great tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble that Jesus Christ said in Matthew 24, verses 20, 21, 22, would be the time of Jacob's trouble, a time that is so bad that nothing since the beginning of the world, as Christ put it, has been so bad, nor ever shall be as bad as what's coming in this great tribulation. And that is the next major thing to happen in prophecy. And this Pope may be, this current Pope may be helping to set that up, being invited to speak before the European Parliament. We'll have to see what he says, because what he says could help reborder the 5 and 5 eventually, and could just further escalate things along with the EU being made ready for 5 from the east and 5 from the west, countries, regions, to give their power to that beast. And it's the Pope who always holds the coronation ceremony of the emperors who are crowned to be the heads of the Holy Roman Empire. He does it in Frankfurt, Germany, which coincidentally happens to be the headquarters for the ECB, the European Central Bank. And Frankfurt, they do it in the Emperor's Hall, where they hold the coronation ceremony, where the Pope puts the crown on the head of the Emperor of the Roman Empire. And in this case, it'll be the 7th and final head of the revived Holy Roman Empire. That's the next thing to happen in prophecy, friends. That is part of the 5th seal. It'll be accompanied by, as I said, great tribulation, accompanied by a tremendous martyrdom of saints. It'll be the beginning of World War III. It'll be the beast power in charge. It'll be the 7th and final head of the Holy Roman Empire. It'll be the time of Jacob's trouble, and it'll be the time the 2 witnesses are out giving their testimony and making themselves loved by the world. That's tongue-in-cheek as I say that, and I think most of you know that eventually the 2 witnesses will be killed on the streets of Jerusalem, their bodies just left laying there for 3.5 days, and then Christ returns, up they go, and they'll be some of the first to go up, followed by all of the rest of the dead in Christ, and then followed by those who are accounted worthy to escape the tribulation, who are still alive, and then they rise last to meet Christ in the air. Those that are still alive go up last. All right, now there's something else from that chart that's in our story tonight. As you see, the first one, we did a story from the first one, the first seal being the white horse. The second seal is depicted in Revelation as a red horse, war and rumors of war. And our next story relates to the red horse. And we go now to a story related to the battle between the Kurds and the IS, which rages on in Kobane. That's the way they pronounce it. A fierce battle is taking place around the Syrian town of Kobane, near the border with Turkey. Kurdish fighters backed by U.S.-led airstrikes are trying to hold back an advance by Islamic State militants. The town has been besieged for 3 weeks and thousands of Kurds have fled the area. Paul Adams reports from the Turkish side of the border, and ready you see this story and the next one on this, friends.
A ferocious battle for the outskirts of Kobane. After another night of airstrikes, Islamic State fighters seem to redouble their efforts. In the hazy distance, on the left, the muzzle flash of a heavy machine gun. A little further back, a tank rumbles forward. The defenders of Kobane are massively outgunned. At a nearby crossing point, the last desperate civilians are coming out. They've endured weeks of fighting and mounting terror. They're leaving almost everything behind. Turkey has yet to intervene, but today the war reached across the border. A rocket hit a family home, injuring several people. Local Kurds, angry and defiant. The police decided to move people out of harm's way, back from the border, and it didn't take long for tempers to flare. The Turkish authorities are absolutely determined to clear this whole area. They've evacuated civilians from 2 villages very close to the border, and as you can see, they're firing tear gas in an attempt to get everyone else to leave. Watch it. With the police closing behind us, the first canister bounces past. As we start to move off, a second canister is fired from point-blank range. It's in the car! Within seconds, the car is full of gas and on fire. And all the while, across the border, the fate of Kobane is beginning to look desperate. Paul Adams, BBC News, on the Turkey-Syria border.
And friends, that last part of that report is what I said, wait till you see this about. I've actually got some additional footage on that, where that last part of the scene you were just seeing, Paul Adams, they show you more about how the Turkish police fired 2 tear gas canisters at that vehicle carrying the BBC reporting team as it was leaving the border area near Kobane, Syria. The second round was fired at point-blank range near the rear window, filling the van with tear gas and briefly setting fire to the vehicle. Let's go back to correspondent Paul Adams, who was reporting as this was being filmed shortly before the attack, and the cameras kept rolling during the next few minutes. You'll see the team is on the Turkey-Syria border to cover Islamic State's siege of the nearby town. Nobody, thankfully, was injured in the incident. Here's Paul Adams again.
The Turkish authorities are absolutely determined to clear this whole area. They've evacuated civilians from 2 villages very close to the border, and as you can see, they're firing tear gas in an attempt to get everyone else to leave. Watch it. Jesus Christ. Do not go without space. It's in the car! Stop, stop, stop!
Get out! Get out! Get out!
No! Oh.
Good effort, guys. Thank you.
Okay, so what happened then? As we were driving away, the vehicle that was coming behind us, the police vehicle, fired a tear gas canister. It came straight through the back window here, filled the back of our truck with tear gas. We had to get out in a hurry. As you can see, it's a bit of a mess. We probably ought to leave.
Friends, I wanted to show you that extended video on that because I wanted you to see what some of the journalists have to go through sometimes when they are out in war areas like this to bring us news of what's going on out there, firsthand, right there on the spot. And this video, next video, from the same area, Kobane, where Swedish journalist Joachim Medin, who says he was the last foreign journalist to leave the town of Kobane, he filed this report for the BBC before he left.
When I was evacuated around lunchtime today, I saw several civilians armed with Kalashnikovs, any light weaponry you can find, guarding their homes, their neighborhoods. People didn't really know what to expect. They knew that ISIS were getting close every day. They were actually getting 1 or 2 kilometers closer every day. Right now we can hear lots of fighting in the background here, and I was sitting just a few hours ago here having coffee with a family, sort of between the fence and the railroad tracks behind us. And we could see ISIS vehicles only 2 kilometers away. And obviously that means they're really, really close to Kobane and the people stuck behind the fence over here. Thousands of people have already left the city and gathered behind us here. And I saw at least hundreds of people staying inside their homes. And obviously, because we haven't seen any more people gathering here, they're still in the city right now, surrounded by ISIS. I personally helped to bury one young man that was hit in the head by one of these shellings, and in a backyard because it was too dangerous to reach the local cemetery. The last restaurants closed, I guess, yesterday or 2 days ago. People are just surviving on what they might have. People told me how they would actually stay on the Syrian side of the border until the very last minute, until ISIS came. They refused to go into Turkey because they knew there would be no future in a Turkish refugee camp.
All right, excuse me, friends, and if what you've seen so far is not enough to help you really pray from the heart when you get on your knees tonight, I think perhaps this next story will especially help, should help to do that. The parents of U.S. hostage Peter Kassig have appealed to Islamic State militants to show mercy and release their son. In a video statement, Ed and Paula Kassig said they were proud of their son and the humanitarian aid work that he had done. It follows the release of a video by the militant group on Friday, which showed the beheading of British aid worker Alan Henning. That video ended with a threat to kill 26-year-old Mr. Kassig. It is believed that Mr. Kassig changed his given name to Abdul Rahman and converted to Islam while in captivity. Here's the video featuring his parents, friends.
My name is Ed Kassig, and this is my wife, Paula. I'm a school teacher, and my wife is a nurse who works with refugees. Our son is Abdul Rahman, formerly known as Peter. He disappeared on October 1st of last year near Raqqa, Syria. At an early age, our son was inspired by his grandfather to do humanitarian work. When he saw the suffering of the Syrian people, he went to Turkey and founded an organization to provide aid and assistance. He helped train 150 civilians in skills needed to provide medical aid to the people of Syria. His organization gave food, cooking supplies, clothing, and medicine to those in need. He grew to love and admire the Syrian people and felt at home there. Our son's journey culminated in him embracing Islam. Sadly, he was taken captive and is not free to continue his life's work serving the people of the region. The driving force in our family has always been to serve others. Our son comes from 2 long lines of teachers and humanitarian workers. Our family deplores all human suffering and the loss of innocent life, no matter who is responsible. We respond by trying to provide aid and assistance. Our son was living his life according to that same humanitarian call when he was taken captive. We know that the Syrians are suffering. We also believe violence is not the solution to the problems that trouble us all. There is so much that is beyond our control. We've asked our government to change its actions, but like our son, we have no more control over the U.S. government than you have over the breaking of dawn. We implore his captors to show mercy and use their power to let our son go.
Dear son, we hope that you will see this message from me and your father. We are so very proud of you and the work you have done to bring humanitarian aid to the Syrian people. We were grateful and relieved to have received your messages earlier this year. We know you were very worried about your friend who was taken with you. He was released and is well. Please know that we are all praying for you and your safe return. Most of all, know that we love you, and our hearts ache for you to be granted your freedom so we can hug you again and then set you free to continue the life you have chosen, the life of service to those in greatest need. We implore those who are holding you to show mercy and use their power to let you go.
Okay, friends, I hope that helps you to be able to pray, Thy kingdom come, and to even add to it a request that God show mercy to the son of these parents who you just heard speaking. I'm going to change the color of the horse now to the pale color, the pale green color. I explained in the opening of the program how that 4th seal from Revelation is depicted by a pale horse who has a rider who's named Death. And one of the primary characteristics of this horse, as Jesus Christ described it in plain language, is loimus, disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. And in the instance of disease epidemics, Alistair Lighthead reports that 50 people who Thomas Duncan had contact with are being monitored for signs of the Ebola virus. The first person to be diagnosed with Ebola within the United States has deteriorated from a serious to a critical condition, doctors in the state of Texas say. Thomas Duncan, who caught the virus in his native Liberia, is being treated at a Dallas hospital in isolation. Earlier, it emerged that the flat where he lived is being cleansed by hazardous material specialist, and its remaining 4 occupants have been moved to a private home. Some 3,431 people have died in West Africa in the worst Ebola outbreak yet. Here's the video report on this.
Suiting up before entering the apartment where Thomas Eric Duncan took ill. Cleaning teams sealed up the car Mr. Duncan had used during the 4 days he was contagious with Ebola before being put in an isolation ward. Sheets, clothes, towels he used were all boxed and removed for disposal. Thomas Duncan is still seriously ill. 50 people he had contact with are now being closely monitored in case they develop symptoms.
Every Ebola outbreak over the past 40 years has been stopped. We know how to do this, and we will do it again.
In West Africa, the number of deaths is approaching 3,500. More than twice that number are infected, and it's increasing exponentially. Freelance cameraman Ashoka Mukpo is the latest American to have been infected in Liberia. He and the NBC News crew he was working with
Friends,
are being flown back to the US.
He's a little better today. He was very nervous yesterday, of course. It's a very frightening experience. He's trying to keep his spirits up, but of course it's a very difficult time for him.
The fear of Ebola is spreading across America. A patient is being held here in Washington, D.C. in isolation, but there have been many false alarms. As Thomas Duncan fights the virus in Dallas, doctors are waiting and hoping others have not been infected. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News.
Okay, friends, we're going to keep the horse green for the next story, even though it could relate to the red horse as well. And yet, because it's about our brother Naphtali in Sweden, who is recognizing a Palestinian state, I'm putting it under the category that Jesus Christ spoke of when he mentioned Tarakeh. It's something that would happen between the third and the fifth seal. Tarakeh being defined in the Greek-English lexicons as trouble, disturbances, troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, mobs and seditions. And in the sense of disturbances or trouble, this is very disturbing news to me, and I'll give you a verse from the Bible after we read this story to you. This story broke on Friday. There's no video available on it yet, but I do have a photograph that I can pull forward here, and we'll explain. I'll read the story. Sweden has just elected a new center-left government led by Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. He's second from the left in this picture. Sweden is to recognize the state of Palestine. Prime Minister Stefan Löfven has said, the first long-term EU member country to do so. The conflict between Israel and Palestine can only be solved with a two-state solution, he said during his inaugural address in Parliament. It should be, quote, negotiated in accordance with international law, end quote, he said. Sweden last month voted out the center-right alliance coalition of Fredrik Reinfeldt after 8 years. That allowed the Social Democrats, led by Mr. Löfven, to form a government with other parties on the left, including the Greens. I'm quoting him again. He says, a two-state solution requires mutual recognition and a will to peaceful coexistence. Sweden will therefore recognize the state of Palestine, Mr. Löfven said on Friday, without giving a timeline for the recognition. Sweden will join more than 130 other countries that recognize a Palestinian state. Most of the EU's 28 member states have refrained from recognizing Palestine statehood and those that do, such as Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia, did so before joining the bloc. The Palestinians have long sought to establish an independent sovereign state in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem as its capital, and the Gaza Strip that they say, or everybody says, is occupied by Israel since the 1967 Six-Day War. Correspondents say Sweden's move is likely to be strongly criticized by Israel and the U.S., who argue that an independent Palestinian state should only emerge through negotiations. Now, this picture, I'll bring it forward again here. The caption for this picture says, Palestinians say peace process is hampered by Israeli settlements like this one in the West Bank. Well, I would simply add to that, hampered by, to them by that, and a whole lot of rockets out of Gaza and other shenanigans with a people that do things that evidence you cannot trust them to be a peaceful partner state to you. But the rest of this story, friends, says in 1988, the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat unilaterally declared a Palestinian state within the pre-June 1967 lines. This won recognition from about 100 countries, mainly Arab, communist, and non-aligned states, several of them in Latin America. The 1993 Oslo Accord between the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, and Israel led to mutual recognition. However, 2 decades of on-off peace talks have since failed to produce a permanent settlement. In 2012, the UN General Assembly voted to upgrade the status of the Palestinians to that of a non-member observer state. It followed a failed bid to join the international body as a full member state in 2011 because of a lack of support in the UN Security Council. And now, I've got a verse of Scripture, friends, and I think let's read that, and then I'm going to explain the relationship of Sweden, who in the Bible is Naphtali, to Ephraim and Manasseh. Let's bring the Scripture forward, and I'll read that to you first. From Isaiah 9, verse 21, there's a prophecy that says, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim-Manasseh, and they together shall be against Judah. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. Now, before I pull this slide off the screen or into the background, let me explain. Most of you know Judah is the tribe of Judah, are your modern day, your Jews. Some of you may not know, some of you do, of course, who Manasseh and Ephraim are. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim-Manasseh. Manasseh is the modern-day descendants of the United States. Ephraim are the modern-day descendants of the UK. And the prophecy here is that these are the 2 sons of Joseph. Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, Israel, whose name was changed to Israel. Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. This prophecy is about them, that in the end times, together they shall be against their brother Judah. They shall go against the Jews. And we're already starting to see the United States doing a number of policy things against Israel, and the UK following suit on that. But here, brother Naphtali, one of the brothers of Joseph, and Ephraim and Manasseh take the name of Joseph. They stand in the shoes of Joseph, the way God did that in prophecy. So Ephraim and Manasseh, they're considered half-tribes of Joseph, the son of Joseph. And Sweden, let me bring a slide up on the screen that you can see on this slide. If you count down to where you see Naphtali. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th one down, it's in alphabetical order. You see the tribe of Naphtali there is your modern day Sweden. Let me change that slide and bring you one that depicts it in just a little bit different way. You see where Sweden is, in this one it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 9th one down. Sweden is Naphtali. Naphtali is the second son of Rachel's handmaid Bilhah. And he's one of the 12 sons of Jacob, Israel. And even though that scripture that I just read you mentions specifically Ephraim and Manasseh, the two sons of Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, Israel, Naphtali is another son, and he's joining Ephraim and Manasseh, actually getting out front of Ephraim and Manasseh in moving against our dear brethren and brothers, the tribe of Judah, the Jews over in the modern state of Israel. Friends, that's it for this Sunday night report. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow evening, Monday night, here on Nightcast for the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying thanks for joining me, friends. Long and good night.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.